right? Like, I know that there's other stuff y'all want to be doing. I know that you probably want to be asleep right now, or watching TV, or playing basketball, or doing whatever you do on Facebook, on the internet. But like, you don't know how powerful your words are going to be. You don't have to take this time that we write poems at the end of the day and just like be like, oh, another dumb poem. You can take it, and some of y'all I've read your poems, and some, if not most of you guys, are actually like getting great messages across and teaching me as your teacher things that I had no idea about, with your family or your community or what you like to do. So just think about that when you write, that like you can take that time and get your message out, because that's exactly what Langston Hughes did. He wasn't like, I'm going to be this famous writer. He was black in the 1920s. That was a hard thing to do. He was the first black writer to support himself. This was not like paved the way already and he's just going to come up in here and do his thing. He had to work hard. So it's important to think about that. But now that we have a little background on Langston Hughes, we are going to start reading. So this first poem is called Night Funeral in Harlem. And it starts on page 44, which you should already be on. As you're reading, you need to be looking for these characterization things that we've already talked about, right? So things that the author, that Mr. Hughes, includes to let us know more about the characters. We'll go back through and underline together anything that you might have missed after we read the poem, but you should be actively reading, which means I should see your all pencils moving as we read, okay? So, does anyone want to read this poem out loud? Do we have a volunteer? Volunteer? Keandre? All right, thank you. It's kind of a long poem. You got it? I trust you. Yep, you can begin. So that everyone needs to have pencils in their hands, because we're looking for signs of characterization. So you need to be actively reading. I should see your eyes moving. All right, Keandre, you can begin.
The flowers came from that.
Oh, we got to start right here. Night funeral.
Oh.
Yep.
That's all. Night funeral. Yep. Night funeral in the home. Where did they get them two fine cars? Insurance man, he did not pay his insurance matters the other day. Yet they got it. Satan box. His head to play. Night funeral in corner. Who was it said that breath of flowers? What flowers came from that poor boy's friends? They'll want flowers too. They meet their end.
I'm going to pause it, actually. So, did anyone underline anything that tells us about the characters or the main character of this poem? I found a few things. Let's look at the second line. Where did they get them two fine cars? If they're saying it like that, them two fine cars, you think those are cars they see every day? No, right? So what does that maybe say about the character?
They're probably rich.
If the cars are a surprise, does that mean they're rich?
Poor.
Or they're poor, because they're not used to seeing them, right? Right?
Oh, I thought they meant like good cars, like cars.
These are like, where did they get those cars? Like, where did those two, BMW convertibles show up from? So maybe they're poor if they're not used to seeing that. And then something else, let's go to the next page, on page 45. Then flowers came from that poor boy's friends. What in there do we know about the character?
He's poor.
He's poor. What else do we know? That's the first step. He has friends, right? He's not all alone. So he had a very good distinction. Thank you for pointing that out. So make sure you have that underlined. Poor boy's friends, along with them two fine cars, because both of those say a lot, right? Does anyone else want to keep reading? Keandre? Okay.
Night funeral in home. Who preached that black boy to his grave? Old preacher man preached that boy away charged $5. His girlfriend had to pay. Night funeral in home.
All right, let's pause again. Now what do we know? What else do we know? What do we know about how this character looks, or looked?
He was black.
He's black. So make sure that line should be underlined. Black boy to his grave. You can just underline black boy. He had a girlfriend. Exactly. So again, we know he's not lonely, right? There's one more thing in here that gives us a clue about this character.
He goes to church.
He goes to church. Y'all are on top of your game. job. So let's keep reading this last part. Keandre, you want to finish it out for us?
When it was all over, the lid shut on his head, and the organ had done played, and the last verse, it said, 6 pallbearers carried him out for dead, and off down the limbs having that long black hairs on his head. The street light at this point shined just like a tail. That voice that they was mourning was so dear to them folks that brought the flowers to that girl who paid preacher man. It was all their tears that made that poor boy.
Alright, everybody, let's snaps for Keandre for reading that. Thank you, Keandre, for doing that in such a good poet voice. So, that last stanza, or the last technically 2 stanzas, do y'all know what a pallbearer is? That's someone, how many of y'all ever had to go to a funeral?
Yes.
A pallbearer, those are the people that carry the coffins. Exactly. So, there's 6 of them, and that's normal. But the fact that he has pallbearers, again, goes back to what idea? He's got friends. And then there's something else that kind of reinforces that too. And that's that he was so dear, right? The author is saying that this person that lived in Harlem that died, this black boy, he was dear, right? He had friends. People cried at his funeral. So now that we've read, we're going to think about a few questions. First question we're going to think about together as a class. We've kind of already talked about it, but let's just get a few lightning hands up, quick ideas, quick summaries. What do we know about the person who has died? We just talked about these things. He's black. And you guys can be writing these answers down. In fact, I would probably write these down if I were you because they're going to come up later. Is there space on here for that? Oh, yeah. Number 1. So he's black. What else do we know? He had a girlfriend and he goes to church. Those are 2 important things. You should be writing both of those down. 100% of the class is writing. Good job. What else do we know? Anything else? He's got friends. Did y'all put that yet? Did we already write that one?
Yep.
So we have that he has friends. He's black. He had a girlfriend. He went to church. I think that's all we really got, right? And he was poor. Thank you for pulling that one out. If you didn't already have that he was poor, make sure you add that. So the second question, who came to the funeral and who did not? I want you to turn to a partner and take 30 seconds and talk about it. Now think about, before we get started, eyes on me, before we get started, who would normally come to a funeral?
The parents.
The parents, the family,
The whole family.
friends, all that. So wait, now that we know that, think about who we just said came to this funeral and talk to your partner about who came, but who also, more importantly, did not come.
That's okay.
Talk to your partner. Take 30 seconds.
His family.
How do you know that? Talk to your partner about how you know that.
Friends.
All right. You gotta talk, gotta talk, gotta talk. Gotta talk. Who didn't come? All right, so who came to the funeral? Who do we know came?
His friends.
His friends and girlfriend. How do we know that?
Because she paid for it.
Because she paid for it. Right, and the author says that, right? Now, who did not come?
His mom.
His family. What does that make us think?
His mom and dad might be dead.
His mom and dad might be dead. What else? What else? They don't care about him. Y'all, you guys are doing such a good job at pulling out this indirect characterization, right? What?
You should get points.
You should get a point?
3.
All right, let's get a point. That's fair. So,
5.
why is this indirect characterization?
Because it says, it says how he feels and acts.
Right, and also, the author, by not including things, that can say a big statement, right? Like if you're in a fight with your mom or dad, or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your brother or your best friend, and say, like, when I talk to my parents on the phone, every time I hang up, I say, I love you. Now, if I get in a fight with my mom, I'm like, whatever, talk to you later, and hang up the phone, it's more well, first of all, I'd be getting a phone call back real quick.
Yeah.
But secondly, what's more important than what I said, my mom's not going to call me back. I mean, she's going to call me back and say not to use that tone with her, but she's going to say, I can't believe you didn't say I love you. Because in my family, end of the day, I don't care how mad you are at each other, we say we love each other. That's our tradition, and that's our thing. So it's more what I left out that would get me in trouble than what I said. So in this case, the author is leaving that out. He's purposely not including that character's family. And that says a lot, and that is great that you guys were able to pull that out. So this third question on your sheet, actually, if you haven't already, take 30 seconds and fill in number 2. You should have that written down. Number 2. Peyton has it written down, Emmanuel has it written down, Jamie has it written down. This whole side has it written down. So let's talk about number 3. What was Hughes trying to say to the country about Harlem? They kind of talked about this a lot. So based off the pictures we saw and what we talked about with the Harlem Renaissance and what we just read, take 2 minutes, actually take a minute and a half, and silently write down what he's trying to say and why. And the answer for number 3. Take 90 seconds. 100% of pens should be moving and writing. Number 3. See how Gary is answering this question. Anya's answering, Jamia is answering. Jamie is writing. Peyton is reading. Andrew is writing. So in 10 seconds, everyone should have an answer for number 3. Alright. So can I have one volunteer, someone we have not heard from today?
Me.
Someone we have not heard from today.
You didn't hear me.
Alright.
Which one?
Alright, we gotta use respectful language, okay? Can someone just shout out a brief answer to number 3? Rondarius. What? There's poor people there? Sorry, I just couldn't hear what you said. That's a good start. Let's build off that. Can someone build off that? There are poor people in Harlem, but yes.
They say like that picture you showed us about being chaos, like it's really not chaos.
Exactly. There's poor people, but they have community, right? They have families and friends too. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or white or black. Someone died, and that person had friends and a girlfriend and a preacher that cared about him.
Wait, he got killed?
We don't know how he died. We don't know how old he was. If the author says poor boy, but that could have been a man.
Well, let me see what you
Poor boy probably means he was young, unless maybe it was a grandfather referring to someone who was like 30 or 40. That's not like a boy anymore. Well, that was Langston Hughes. This poem is by Langston Hughes, not about Langston Hughes.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Alright. So we gotta take speed through because I've spent too much time talking. We're gonna take a quick break in between these 2 poems to talk back about a structure, and we're gonna talk about sound devices. So turn to page 46 in your books. I think it's 46. Everyone should be turning to page 46 silently and independently. It's a lot of work, but that's because you got to get credit for a whole class in like a few weeks. And y'all are smart, and you can do it, and you're great students. So, sound devices. Let's go through these real quick. Dialect. What is dialect? Someone read it out loud. Peyton.
And writing that indicates the way someone speaks rather than using correct grammar.
Or instead of correct grammar, we could also say standard English, but I know that's what it says in there. So that's like, I ain't ready yet is the example. Yeah, or like, man, you better hush up. That's not like technically standard English, but that's dialect. Or y'all, using the word y'all is dialect because that is a southern thing. Okay, I need all three of your eyes up here. Turn this way. We're gonna have to move on up the consequence ladder. Thank you. So next, or why do poets use dialect? Does anyone have a good idea? To give a picture in their head, maybe describe where they're from, right? Okay, so let's move on to rhythm. Rhythm is
Beat.
the beat of writing. So the example is beat an empty barrel with the handle of a broom, hard as they were able, boom, 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 right? That's a beat, that's the rhythm. So why would that be important? Why would poets use it? Because what? Sorry. They're using imagery because a rhythm can kind of create an image, right? Like we're talking about a basketball. Dribble, dribble, dribble down the court. That creates an image, right? But it's more because of the rhythm. And it can oftentimes like imitate the action of a poem. So if a poet is writing something about a dance, then their poetry could be very flowy, like the music that they're trying to imitate the dance of, right? Like if they're writing about a dance in a certain way, you can kind of hear that almost, right? So we're only going to go over those two today. Actually, let's go over one more. Repetition. Can anyone read repetition for me? Or for all of us?
A phrase or single word that is repeated, example of the line, I,
Eyes.
I is repeated throughout,
Cues.
poem.
So Langston Hughes' poem that we're about to read. So that, the reason poets would do that is because it shows importance. Like, if a poet keeps saying the same thing over and over again, like how I keep trying to say, like, use your voice, use your writing, express yourself. That's because I think it's important, right? So when poets do that, it's because it's something that's important or has a meaning in the poem. So, we're going to read the poem Mother to Son by Langston Hughes, which should be right underneath, silently and independently. But you need to be underlining as you read. Alright, I'll read it out loud, but you can also be following, you need to be following along silently and underlining things that you think have characterization. Okay? Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor. Bare. But all the time I've been a-climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on them steps, 'cause you find it's kinder hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Okay, so take a second. Think about that. And can I have a volunteer to come hold this up? Because I forgot to do that. Hey, let's get paid.
Ow.
Thanks for volunteering though, Keandre.
Oh.
So can you stand over on this side maybe so the rest of the class can see? Okay, so I'm going to model how we're going to do this with the first two lines, and then you guys are going to take a few minutes and look for these methods of characterization on your own. Well, let's go through it together. The first two lines. Or we're going to look for these sound devices too. That's why we talk about sound devices. Sorry, I'm getting confused. So, well, son, I'll tell you. I'm going to underline well, son, because you would never start like a research paper with, well, son, let me tell you about the Amazon rainforest, right? That's dialect. And why would that be dialect? Looking back at your definition. Because it's what? It has some meaning to the poem, but why does that have meaning? What does that tell us about the poem, or about the character? Why does the author say it that way?
Hold on, what'd you say?
Well, son, I'll tell you. That's how they speak. And what is that? What is that? Direct or indirect characterization? Think again, indirect, what they say, right? We're learning about this character by what they say. Now, who would you hear that would say something like this? Like, would you say to your mom or your daddy, well, son, or well, girl, let me tell you?
Yeah.
You would? No, you wouldn't, right? Who would maybe say that to you? Your mom. A granny, right? A granny. Someone maybe a little older that's like, well, son, I'll tell you.
My grandpa, well, he's not really my grandpa, like he's on my stepdad's side, but in Ripley, like when we go down there, like there's this old little man, and he's always like, well, son.
Well, like an older person, you know, that's something they're going to say to someone that's younger. So, well, son, I'll tell you. And that, again, is dialect because it doesn't use standard English, and it tells us something about the character. Life for me, and you should be underlining as I'm underlining, ain't been no crystal stare. Ain't been no crystal stare. So if we're still talking about dialect, what's the first thing in here that cues us that Langston Hughes is using dialect to tell us about this character? What word? Crystal stare. Close. We're going to get to that part a little before. What word in here is not correct English or standard English? Ain't.
Ain't been no.
Ain't been no, right? Like, if you're writing that research paper, you're not going to be like, the people that live there ain't been there for long. Well, then we got to work on that, girl, because that's not standard English. And when you're writing these academic papers, when you're writing these college essays, you got to use standard English sometimes. There are times when it's appropriate to use this, like in poems, but there's times when it's not. So life for me ain't been no crystal stare. For this sake, it's okay, because it's a poem. Now let's go back to what Jamia said about the crystal stare part. What did we think about earlier with crystal stares? They break too easily. What else did we talk about? Like the people that would have crystal stares. Rich people. What else? We talked about this. Y'all had some great ideas. Crystal stares. What do we think about people that have power? They have power, right? So this character is saying, life for me ain't been no crystal stare. So what do you think they're trying to say? They're not rich. It's not easy, right? Like they don't. All right, guys. That's verbal warning officially, okay? Life for me ain't been no crystal stare. So life hasn't been easy. So now you guys take the next like 2 or 3 minutes, let's say 2.5, and read the rest of the poem and underline, like we just did, things that are methods of either direct or indirect characterization. Okay? So 2 minutes, 100% of pens should be moving. Nope, just look at things. It might be a sign of dialect, or maybe a word or a phrase that's repeating. That might be important. So you should be reading through the whole poem. You don't need to answer the questions yet. You should be underlining. Mia's done some great underlining. Alright, let's take one more minute. Underlining things that are dialect, or maybe that are repeated, like in repetition. Alright, so pencils down in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so you guys have read through this poem. We're not going to answer the questions right now, but you've looked through it. We've got some examples of dialect, characterization, right? And the reason that this stuff is important is because it allows us to make connections to these characters. Because we see like, well son, I'll tell you, ding ding ding, connection. That reminds me of my grandma. Why? Because that's something that she would say to my brother. So around the room are going to be 4 big posters like this that have quotes from the 2 poems that we've read today. And what you're going to do is when I say go, you will get up. You can take your booklets with you if you need to reference the poem. You're going to take your pen or your pencil, and with no more, how many of us are there? There should be no more than 2 people at a poster at a time. You'll have 2 minutes to write on here how you connect to that poem or that quote. What about it do you connect to? So you have to say, I connect to it because, so boy, don't you turn back. I could say, I connect to this poem because the author is encouraging the character not to give up, and that's something that my parents told me almost every day. So you can't just say, I like this, or I don't like this. We're going to think a little deeper. We're going to dig a little deeper because y'all can do it, okay? So can someone summarize for the rest of the class, what are we doing right now? And doing what? I'll show you where they are when we get started. Also, to add another layer, only 2 people at a poster, you may also choose, if someone has already been at that poster and you switch, and you're like, oh yeah, I totally agree with that, or maybe like, you know, I don't see that. You can choose to respond to one of your classmates' responses as long as it is constructive and respectful. Okay? So everyone stand up, shake it out, wake up, grab your pen and your booklet, and you'll have 2 minutes at each poster. And so those 2 minutes start now. There's one here, there's one up here, there's one back there. What? You're going to ask. You're going to explain it to all of us.
Okay,